afternoon. I'm back. Hey! Don't have to see any white bits because according to Win, I haven't got a tan to start with. Welcome. It's not been a very busy first 10 days of June regarding the transfer window, but obviously there's potential reasons behind that, which is what we're going to have a discussion on today. But before we get into all that, obviously my mate to my right, the mighty Win, is in the house.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon from the Geordie Yam Yam. But like I say, let's get into the housework and then we'll crack on with the show. Welcome to all watching across the platforms. Thanks to everybody that works in the background. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy the show. Subscribe. It's totally free. Hit the bell for future content. Obviously, we'll be doing lots of discussions about what's gone wrong, what's gone right, and whether any transfers, if any transfers, obviously come in. We'll be doing obviously shows across the board. So if you hit the bell, you'll get a notification straight away. Obviously, we have got a web page, but that's been nullified, so don't even bother looking at that at any point. But you can become a member, and there's different levels to choose from, depending on what type of content you want to watch. So go and have a look at that. If you've got a question during the show, put a Q in front of the question. It helps me and Win just highlight it as we go along. It's not guaranteed, by the way, so if you want to guarantee it, use the $sign, throw us a super chat, and that will guarantee your message read out. And anybody that wants or becomes a member during the show, or any of our lovely members that gift memberships out there, will be highlighted and thanked as again. So how are we, mate? I mean, obviously it's been a bit of a slow start, but you know, I mean, I went on holiday, and the reasons why I chose to go on holiday as the season ended was exactly what I expected. Do you think? And I'm going to put this quite openly and as easy as I can across the board. Do you think that us as fans take everything that Eddie Howe says in his presses, you know, we've got to act quickly? Does that not say it says to me, you know, this transfer window was an opportunity for all the clubs going to the World Cup, the Club World Cup, to do a little bit of business, so they've got players on board to go and start during that tournament, and obviously gel into the squad. I didn't expect Newcastle to do any business until the 1st of July. That was my anticipation, and it looks very much, obviously, that's what's going to happen. Do you think that fans see the words of Eddie Howe saying that we are going to act quickly? Do you think that that was the opportunity for some fans to be a little bit negative, the fact that we haven't had any signings in these first 10 days of June?
Well, what you've got to take into consideration is that the money that we've got to spend doesn't actually happen until the 1st of July, because the financial year ends. So the point at which the 2020, 21, 22 spend disappears, which was when we made all the big signings and had a £73 million loss, that doesn't take effect. It doesn't come back onto the books, if you like, until the 1st of July. The question is, are we actually, have we been making moves behind the scenes so that on the 1st of July, we're ready to go? It's all very well saying you can do moves during this little mini window, but you still got to have the cash. Otherwise, we would be guilty of overspending in the 24-25 season. So the money doesn't actually appear in our coffers until the 1st of July. Now, the reason we've, you know, titled the show today the Saudi tax is because there is still a belief among the club's hierarchy that clubs are trying to take a lend of us in the kind of false belief that we've got unlimited funds to spend. When in reality, even though we've got the richest owners in the world, the PSR regs prevent us spending. Now, it doesn't prevent us spending anything. I've said for long enough that the money's been there for the last 3 windows. I mean, that was proven in the summer when we put whatever figure you want to believe, 50 million, 60 million for Gay and 50 million for Alanga. So we know the money was there. So the money was there in January had we chosen to spend it. And again, I'm of the belief that PIF weren't yet fully committed to backing Eddie Howe. They had put their faith in Darren Eales as CEO to appoint a director of football, and he was going to be top dog in that hierarchy. And basically what Eddie did, I think, at the end of the season, when you saw him with his arm around Al Ramayan, and we heard about the meetings that they'd had, he laid his cards firmly on the table and said, who's the boss? Who picks the players? And I think at that stage, the PIF said, on the back of what he's done, he deserves our backing. Now then, the press conference that you refer to, where Eddie said, you know, we've got to be ready to pounce, da-de-da-de-da. That was again him saying to PIF publicly, I want some backing. Now then, the article that's just come out, which we can get on to, is Luke Edwards at the Telegraph claiming, and we all know, or a lot of us feel, he's kind of Eddie's lapdog. Telegraph Sport has been given a unique insight into Newcastle's negotiations for players, amid warnings that there is not enough money to spend large amounts on each of the 4 players they want to sign. Senior club sources, that old club sources, believe a so-called Saudi tax has plagued the club since the takeover by PIF back in October 21, and that it remains an issue. As a result, they are trying to explain to rival clubs, with limited success so far, that there is a warped perception of their spending power. They remain heavily restrained by the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules.
Now, I don't know whether you saw the Kieran Maguire interview on Sky Sports, because Geordie Dan has just put it up on the screen there, just so everybody can see. And obviously he's put there, Kieran, just as we're negotiating, shh, you know. But the one thing that I must highlight on this, and I wasn't really aware until I started reading up on this, because it's not just the money that we see. I mean, obviously it's now common knowledge that it seems that Burnley are holding out for around about £40 million for Trafford, where obviously the valuation of Newcastle is somewhere in the region of 30 million. But what we don't actually always see on top of this is the representatives' cut of these numbers, because they don't get a cut of the figure from the price that is being given via the club. It's on top of. So obviously we all know Liverpool have got Wirtz from Leverkusen and for €150, but the Reps actually got another £8 million to go on top of that. So what we fail to see as fans sometimes is the fact that we have to look at the hidden charges on top of, because to be fair, it's something that really didn't give me. I didn't really understand how these negotiations start, and I was over there talking to a Galatasaray fan who over in Turkey who was explaining some of the deals that the Turkish players do and how it works over there, and I was like, I need to have a look because I've never really understood how our deals are. And it was only when I was on the way back and I was reading up on some of the articles that I'd saved to read while I was on the plane. And apparently, like I say, that's how it's going to work. So, like Liverpool, the 150 million euros, it's 158 million euros, and that's why it's a club record now for a sale. And that's then they've got to pay performance and stuff like that. I mean, these teams that are around us, and I look at the likes of Wolves who have had to move their end of year to the end of July rather than the end of June, because financially they are absolutely screwed. Thanks, Chris, for your super chat, buddy.
Same as everything when we stole from the Indians.
And it is something that we need to address. But you're absolutely right. It does seem to be the fact that Newcastle, under this umbrella of being the richest owners in the world, do carry a lot of weight. But what we have, constraint-wise, is the same that every other club seems to have, is PSR issues. Now, the reasons why we struggle more than anybody else was because we just didn't have any commercial revenue pre the takeover. So because of what Ashley did and the way it worked with them, so every other team around us that are buying players, yes, they are buying players, but actually have a bigger purse to actually pick from. And Kieran Maguire actually said because of the 70-odd million pound that we were at a loss in 2021 season when the takeover happened, that falls off now. So there's obviously, as he said, as Geordie Dan said in there, we have got margin to actually go out there and spend. But I don't think it's going to be 70 million on every player that we bring in. And I think people have, often look at we are going to make, buy players all going to be A grade. They're not. We have to look at the likes of and again, there's going to be people that aren't enamoured by Trafford coming in as a keeper. I ain't particularly enamoured by Trafford coming in at 40 million if that's what we have to spend, because I believe there's as good a keeper out there in Europe that they can go and lock up. But we know Trafford's been on the earmark for some time now. So have we got a gun held to our head regarding a ransom when it comes to paying a price for a player because we are Newcastle?
Well, either that or, as Crystal Palace found, we go in with a valuation and basically it's take it or leave it. Now, if they leave it, obviously we've got to have other alternatives. Although, as Chris regularly comments, as far as he's concerned, and really as far as I'm concerned, goalkeeper is not a priority for us right at the minute. When we've got Pope and Dubravka, okay, they're not top of the tree, but they're perfectly adequate and have proven to be Premiership players. Next level, perhaps not.
No.
But certainly, if you're going to get, held over a barrel for a goalkeeper, move on. The other thing that the article talks about is there's a new contract for Alexander Isak in the pipeline, and it says talks are expected to start in July.
Exactly. There you go.
All the buzzwords are there. Newcastle cannot spend upwards of £60 million on players when wages are also a consideration. Although the sales of Miguel Almiron and Lloyd Kelly in January brought in around 25 million and has given Newcastle the flexibility to invest in new players, there is not a lot of headroom in which to manoeuvre. Newcastle are targeting a goalkeeper. Burnley's James Trafford is a long-standing priority, as well as a centre-back, a right-sided forward, and a striker to offer support and competition to Isaac. Depending on player sales, another midfielder could arrive, especially as Sean Longstaff is expected to depart. I can hear the cheers in Qatar. Newcastle have identified the players in whom they are interested, but have a valuation on each of them, both in terms of fee and wages, and cannot move away from that if they are going to fill all the positions of need in Eddie Howe's squad. Now then, it says a good example is what happened with Brentford forward Brian Mbeumo. The Cameroon international was identified as a leading target by Newcastle's recruitment team weeks ago, but their attempts to sign the player, universally liked by all the main power brokers at St James's Park, was thwarted. Mbeumo's wage demands, as well as the transfer fee of more than £60 million, proved to be too expensive a deal to pursue, and the player has since indicated he wants to go to Man United. But
that's more wages though, mate, than looking for a plan, isn't it? When you look at the two players. Now, I'm going to give you, for instance. Now, this is something that I was really pleased to see with Tino Livramento's comments, with all the news, with him being linked to Manchester City. And he's turned round. I don't know whether you read that.
But Gary, excuse me, 2 minutes. I've got to knock at the door.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Postman always rings twice. If you were to look at like Tino Livramento's comments when he was making obviously feedback regarding the links to Man City, he's turned round and said, "I don't want to move. I'm more than happy at Newcastle because it's a club going somewhere. Why would I want to join a club that's going backwards?" And obviously, there's going to be people out there that see that as a negative comment. It's just like a throwaway comment. But I think, from a player's perspective, when you look at where Man United are now, Man United are going to be a different animal next season. We know that. They've brought in some good players, but they're still going to be a problem at the back. They're going to still concede goals. They can score goals if they obviously keep going forward with the players that they're bringing in. But unless they strengthen the back line, they are going to be still very weak in defence. And I think that is the problem with a lot of clubs these days. They're only highlighting certain areas. Now, obviously, we've said for a long time, for Newcastle to be a top 4 team on a constant basis. And like I said, I think Eddie Howe's done an amazing job to get us in Champions League 2 out of 3 seasons. And like I say, more people will say that's more luck than judgment. And I think it is a little bit of an element of luck. Going through 3 windows without buying a player or bringing a player in to freshen up is only going to hamper the squad going forward. It's not going to pressure or put pressure on players that are already playing. And it comes to something when we are just fans and you can actually name the team that's going to start the weekend without scratching your head. So if we do that, the chances of Eddie Howe doing something different isn't something that's going to change unless we are, we've got to stick to the guns. And I'm quite right by saying, we cannot just start throwing bad money at average players, because to me these players aren't elite players. They could be, but like the likes of Trafford and stuff like that. I'm not really, as much as I like Mbeumo, I ain't upset that Mbeumo's not coming to Newcastle. It's not something that I think, you take his penalty goals out there, his figures aren't electrifying. Yes, he's a good player. I'm not saying he's not a bad player, but when you actually look at his figures as a whole, there ain't a vast difference, XG wise, GA, to what we've already got. So yes, he's a better player, but like I say, the turnover and like I said, people are going to say he's a younger player. He's not that young, Mbeumo. So are we looking at Premier League ready, which is obviously what Eddie Howe likes? Do we have to start looking elsewhere now because of the Premier League tax? And I don't think this is across the board. I think it's from Premier League teams. And I think that's something that Eddie Howe needs to sort out if this is true to form. I think we need to start looking at maybe other options. I mean, I know somebody's already put Chevalier in there. He would have been my first choice anyway, over Trafford, from what I've seen of him. The player who's very comfortable with his feet. Reading lots of articles on the lad on, the way they play, where they draw players on. Very similar to Forest. If you look at the type of teams, they draw the opposition on, and the build-up is started from Chevalier at the back. Like I say, he was comfortable with both feet. So, do you lose an element of a goalkeeper through he's only 6'4", I think he is. Do you look at these type of players and say, I want to be a team that builds from the back, the likes of Forest? We're still looking at pace up top, the likes of Isaac, Gordon, to play over the top when we draw them on. The one thing that concerns me, if I'm honest with you, if we don't bring the right players in, we've struggled so much this season from opposing teams doing the low block. Unless we get creative midfielders or attacking midfielders coming into the side, are we ever going to break these low blocks down? So it's not about names. It's about the players themselves playing within a system that Eddie Howe is obviously looking at.
You've got the alternative here between, if you're talking about breaking low blocks, ideally what you want is a winger, inside forward even, with a trick, who can actually beat a man.
Who can carry a ball.
Yeah, who can beat a man, take the ball with him. A bit like Maxi, if you like.
Yeah. But with an end product.
but with a better end product, let's say. With an end product like he produced occasionally. Yeah. Because I mean, some games. I mean, I always look at that Wolves volley from outside the box. I mean, that's some technique, to hit a ball like he did from outside the box, keeping it low, and getting that draw. Well, I think Maxi's zenith was against Man City, wasn't it?
Man City, yeah.
He was unplayable that day. But
it was so inconsistent, wasn't it?
What you invariably sacrifice with that type of player is the defensive side of things. If that's in their mindset, they tend not to be, the worker, defensive worker at all.
Yeah. It's like the Mo Salahs of this world, isn't it?
Ginola springs to mind.
Yeah.
Robert, all these great wingers, defence is the last thing on their mind. And is Eddie prepared to tweak the system or whatever, the way we defend to accommodate a player like that? Or do we go with tried and tested? There's a name that's come up lately. A few people have been mentioning it now, from various sources, and that's Kudos.
Yeah.
And he is a player that I wouldn't mind seeing, and I think he would be within our budget. Because
I like Kudos.
He has got a trick, and
Yeah. But again, he's because of Bowen playing on that right wing, and like I said, I mean, if I had my way, Bowen would be probably the first choice
Well,
for that
it's
right
been
side
my
because he's
first choice.
absolutely only because that's his natural position, and you can see that, and he's a good left footer. You know, he can go on the outside, he can come on the inside, so he's always got the defenders not really weary of which way he's going to go, and he scored again another player that can play through the middle as well. The only problem is with me, Kudus, is the fact that he seems to be, again, another Anthony Gordon, favours that left position coming onto his strong foot. And that is always going to be one of those, talking points for me. Why would we want to go out there and spend another lot of money on another left-sided player that may not produce the goods? The same as we've seen from Anthony Gordon, same as we've seen Harvey Barnes. But for me, it's more the fact that have they given these lads enough time on the right-hand side to see whether they can produce? I don't think we have. I think that with the performance of Murphy this season, I don't think, apart from bit part scenarios where you've seen, Anthony Gordon go over there sometime during the game, it's never from the start because, again, Murphy has played this season. I think what we need to start looking at, especially in the off-season, if we don't buy a right winger, is
We've
to
got
give
to
these
buy a
lads
right
more.
winger.
We have.
We've got to
listen.
buy a right winger.
I'm not saying we're not going to. What I'm saying to you is,
if for no
if
other
we know-
reason, then Murphy, like the rest of them, cannot be expected to play 70 games a season.
No, and I agree
happen.
with that. But that's what I said. What you've got this present moment in time. I mean, Murphy's not getting any younger, right? But what I've seen from Eddie Howe this season is he seems to have been afraid to give Gordon a good run on the right hand side or Harvey Barnes a good run on the right hand side. We started once we changed a little bit at the back when we went to a 3. You saw obviously a bit more of a different setup where Harvey Barnes played on the inside right position, gumming on the angle. And to me, again, it didn't seem as though we were having any issues. It was more the fact that once we went back to a flat 4 when Botman went off because he didn't want to give him a full game, you're wrapping him up in cotton wool. We seemed to be a bit more vulnerable at the back. But playing the system as we played, it looked to me as if we could still create lots of chances, and you saw that, even though we didn't get the results, especially the last 2 games of the season. But we did look a different animal, But again, what is Eddie looking at? Are we staying at this 4-3-3? Is he contemplating going at wing backs, or is it something that he just wants to be involved? Because if that's in Eddie's mindset, a right winger may not be the answer. But what I'm saying to you is, look, you're talking about a workhorse. You're absolutely right when you're talking about wing backs. And the player I would look at is Munoz, because he gives you the attacking element. He's a decent defender. He's a decent worker. He's got the legs to go back and forwards. And again, you've got a player that can play in multiple positions.
We've got Kevin Bell here with a comment which is reflecting what an awful lot of people are saying. What annoys me is the likes of Brighton, Bournemouth, Brentford always seem to be able to pick up these great players abroad for cheap, and then they sell them on. Why can't we be the ones picking these gems from abroad? Brighton, Bournemouth, and Brentford can afford to take the risks on players from abroad. All you hear about the players from abroad are the ones that are successful. You don't hear about all the ones that have been bought for 10s and 15s and 20 millions who fade into obscurity. And Newcastle's history is littered with players that we've bought from abroad for good money, relatively good money, not Premier League money. But if we can't afford to fail at the minute. Every transfer move we make has to work, because we can't afford to fail. And this is why I believe Eddie hangs on for tried and tested Prem class players who've done it in the Prem. Because, yes, there'll always be an exception. You know, Bruno's an exception. Botman's an exception. Isaac, to a degree, is a big exception. You know, he wasn't pulling trees up for, you know, and Spain and whatnot.
The Sociedad, yeah. I mean, that's what we said. But is that Eddie Howe working his magic on these individual players? You know, we've had how many players from abroad in the years that have been absolute failures? I mean, you'd need a couple of A4s, wouldn't you, to fill in? I mean, what you've just said there, I might as well put this on from team season here. We are after every Prem proven we lack Champions League quality. I'm not being greedy, but the commercial income from showing our quality in Europe is more needed than Prem attraction. And again, I go to what you've just said there. I think Eddie Howe's under a lot of pressure to continue this top four vein form.
Huge
if you like.
pressure.
Massive pressure. And obviously, you know, as we've seen recently against Senegal, Tuchel hasn't done an amazing job. I know he's obviously testing a lot of players out there. I saw your comment. The only reason we lost was because Byrne didn't play. That was quite funny. In actual fact, it was very poor defending across the back four for all three goals we conceded. But, you know, going on to...
Just saying.
Absolutely. But again, it just proves the ball over the top against pacey opposition when you start to push the foot. I don't think if that's how Tuchel had set up, I don't think even having Byrne in the side would have achieved anything different, if I'm honest with you. They got behind us far too easy because we gave the ball away far too easy in the middle of the park.
Well, it's been my concern again for... Well, since the takeover, the one thing we've never had in the back, especially our centre backs, none of them.
Yeah, quick. But you know what got me? Because I saw your comment during the live game. I mean, I didn't watch the live game; I've only watched the highlights. You made a comment about Gordon's chance at the back post, where the defender just got a toe to it, and then I look at now. You know,
did you see the ground that defender covered?
That's what I'm saying. You look at the ambition. Now, their third goal, when you look at where Walker was, now Walker's now slouch, but their third goal, Walker's 4 or 5 yards in front of this guy in the penalty box. This guy makes that much ground up to get in front of him. And again, it's that ambition, that drive. And I think that's mental. That's the mental approach to games. And I think, you know, whatever you do, you can buy Premier proven players that Eddie Howe is looking at. There's still no guarantee that when they come into this squad, they're going to rip up trees. They're not going to, you know, I've said this too many times. We've seen players move from team to team. Some highlights, some lowlights.
What we've got here is a track record almost second to none.
Yeah.
That instead of players, which has happened in the past, players coming here and becoming worse than what they were prior to joining. Exactly. Every player that's come to this club.
But then you've got to ask yourself.
And even the players that were already here have all improved.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Is that the coach's issue, though, that we've had in the past? Of course it is. You know what I mean? Because they've been big names, but the quality that they've produced, apart from a couple, you know, Chrissy Houghton did, I thought, really good with the squad that he had. I mean, obviously, we all know the others that failed around him. So a lot, you know, I've often said there's a lot of good diamonds out there, you know, and it doesn't all, again, you look at a lot of people's chat, and because, you know, Burnley's played Championship, that's not the individual player's fault. All he's got to do is go out there and perform. And a lot of people are saying, you know, I've watched Trafford a couple of times when I realised that it seems to be 95% that this is the goalkeeper that Eddie Howe's going for. So I had a quick look at some of Trafford's performances past season, and I don't think Burnley would have got into the playoffs if it wasn't for Trafford. So I have no issue.
Anybody who
with Trafford as a
saved 2
goalkeeper.
penalties in the same game against the Mackhams will do it for me.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, but it's still a gamble. Even though Trafford had a great season in the Championship, it's still an absolute massive gamble. But he wouldn't be part of the England squad if he hadn't played well.
No.
If there wasn't something that is shining for that lad, yes, you can say age, and he's not really made a cap yet for himself. I thought Henderson has had a really good season, to be fair.
He had a great game yesterday.
He had a good game, yeah, absolutely.
Not, despite lost.
We could have been 5 or 6, couldn't it, without Henderson?
Without Henderson, could have been, and very good with his feet, by the way.
Absolutely. But I do think, and again, we all talk about how much money we could potentially have to spend. I still sit on the fence when it comes to the types of monies that we've got to spend. I certainly don't think it's anywhere near the 200 million mark, which is what he's obviously going around at the minute. Again, a lot of it, and I've seen in the chat earlier on about, we've seen the likes of Longstaff being linked to Everton and Leeds, the likes of Willock being linked to Crystal Palace.
Well, that's the latest hot one is Willock as Part X.
Well, that was Target, wasn't it? That was the last one.
And just today,
yeah,
Target's been introduced into that
equation exactly, yeah. And now Fulham apparently are interested in Willock. So
well, it was Fulham
originally, wasn't it?
Originally for Willock, but now Palace have said they could be amicable for a give them both.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we go back to this article, it goes on to say Mbeumo would have likely been Newcastle's highest earner if he had signed, and that would inevitably have prompted others at the club to ask for parity, sending the wage bill soaring, or risk carrying disgruntled players moving forward who resent not being paid the same as new arrivals. The negotiations with Isaac will be difficult enough, but the intention will be to make him the highest earner to reward him for his excellence on Tyneside. Bringing in new players on significantly more money than that before those talks even begin is fraught with danger. But it is thought that there will be movement on incumbents at St James's Park later this month, with the intention to sign at least 2 players before the start of pre-season training in July. Now, the fact that he is saying that with this unique insight that he's been given actually says to me that there's 2 players already lined up. And that the reason they haven't been done now, as I said at the start of the show, was until the 1st of July, we don't actually have the money. On the right-hand side of attack, Bournemouth's Antoine Semenyo and Forest's Anthony Elanga have been discussed extensively. But as things stand, the asking prices are too high for meaningful progress to be made. That could change swiftly, but there is only frustration at the moment. Brighton forward How Pedro is another player who has been repeatedly scouted and is seen as a strong potential signing. But there are also concerns about the asking price and the player's willingness to compete with Isaac for a central role. His versatility does help, but a fee of up to 70 million they're talking now for Pedro, and that would blow a huge chunk of Newcastle's budget on one player. Now, bear in mind, this is Brighton we're talking about, who was one of the teams mentioned by Kevin Bell. When Brighton signed Pedro, we were also in the market for him. But PSR, at the time, prevented us going ahead and paying even what they paid for him. So we would have saved money there, right enough, but we simply couldn't afford it at the time.
Exactly.
And now Eintracht Frankfurt, Hugo Ekitike
That's easy for you to say.
has raised its ugly head again. But the £80 million asking price there is putting Newcastle off. So I think Newcastle know what they want, and I think they'll get what they want eventually. They might not get their first choices, which I think Mbeumo probably was, but I have no doubt at all that, call me half full, happy clap, or whatever you want, but I'm quite confident that come the start of the season, we will have a significantly better squad than what we've got now. And all the wringing of hands and weeping and wailing that's going on at the minute is way over the top. Listen, if 1st of September comes and we haven't, there'll be no bigger critic out there than myself. And it wouldn't surprise me at all, especially bearing in mind Tuchel's 2 performances as England coach, if Eddie just doesn't, because if he doesn't feel he's getting the backing now, and I wouldn't blame him, he'll walk away. And that might cheer a lot of people up, it'll not cheer me up. But I wouldn't blame him one little bit. Keegan would have walked long before now.
I mean, there's always going to be an element of every fan that wants big names. I've seen players move, and I've seen players fit straight into squads. Now, there was a chat, I don't know who it was now, I saw coming, and they said, a lot of our players, our quality players now, came in from abroad. So what was the reasoning, to keep going and looking at Premier proven? And I think that is exactly what we said before. It's more the fact that Eddie Howe wants these players to be up to speed in the Premier League, rather than it taking them, or as we saw with the likes of Bruno. I mean, Tonali obviously was a bit different. But when players have come in, Eddie's always had them on the bench because he doesn't trust them to start in the Premier League because of the pace, because of the way the opposition play against you. It can be a little bit of a baptism of fire for players. Now, the biggest problem you get, and we're all guilty of this as fans, and again, we talk about Eddie's protection towards the youngsters, is if you come on and have a bad performance. Now, again, I'll hold my hand up. I've been some hypercritical this season, or last season, I should say, of some of our performances and some of our individual players. But I can't always say that is their fault. What Eddie's done, he's gambled, especially like the likes of J7. Once we'd lost Anderson, we hadn't got a like-for-like player. You can't say Miley's a like-for-like player as Anderson because he's not that type of player to get his foot in and harass and get involved. Willock's a forward-thinking player. He's not even interested, as you said there. He's a luxury player. He wants to break lines. He wants to get in behind. So once you lose the likes of J7, you get players then having to change the way they play because Bruno then has to go over to that left-hand side just to try and get that balance back into the side. And we've seen that. That's been evident this season. So again, you could go out there and you can go and buy these big names out into Europe. Doesn't mean that they're going to come in straight into that side and play well. And I think what Eddie tries to do is he recognises the pressure from the fortress of St James's Park, the voice, when it goes quiet at St James's Park, it's for a reason. And that's because of the performance on the field. And again, it's been evident this season. When we've played bad, and we witnessed a couple of really bad games, and Bournemouth was one of them. The crowd aren't enamoured by the performance. And I think what Eddie Howe tries to do is overprotect. So the last thing he wants to do is go and buy these players to come in and then not be able to perform at the level that the fans require. It's not what Eddie requires, it's what the fans require. Eddie obviously picks a side, and he lives by the sword, he dies by the sword. But I think sometimes, we as fans expect too much from individuals at times. And again, I've been witness to it, you've been witness to it for many a year when we've had big names come through, Hanan Ben Arfa, I thought he was the next Maradona when I first saw him play. But he was so bitty at Newcastle, it was unreal. Some games he looked a worldie, other games he was that bloody lazy. You wanted to get on the field yourself and give him a kick up the ass. And he's one of, a number of players that have been the same. I loved Ginola. But again, at times, he was one of the laziest players you could ever have in a black and white shirt because he was a luxury. He was a luxury player. And you have to play to the way he wants to play rather than the way the gaffer wants you to play. And again, you go back to the Hullet and Shearer debate, Hullet wanted Shearer to play a certain way. Shearer wasn't having it. You know what I mean? So who's bigger? And I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Do you want a player in who's a big name that's going to come in and completely shake the apple tree to the core, where you lose the dressing room? And many a big manager have lost the dressing room because they've brought in names. So we have to be careful how we go here. But I think we have to be also careful because, to me, the balance when it comes to the Saudi tax, as we're naming the show, is only the one side. We cannot give the players on the for sale label the same type of treatment as we're being given for players that we want to bring in, because these players that are obviously out for sale aren't great players, are they? They're not going to take Newcastle forward. So to get them off the books, you've got to give them a price.
If you forget about the crown jewels, how much would you reasonably expect to get for, let's say, Willock? Well, bear in mind, we paid 25 million for him.
Exactly. How long has he been at the club now? 4 or 5 years? 5 seasons?
Well, he came in under Bruce, so it'll be 5 probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 5 seasons, isn't it? But that's what I'm saying. When you actually look at it, if we was to get anywhere near the money back for him, it's a win for me.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the best bit of business, I'm going to say Mitchell has done. If Mitchell's involved with it, I don't know. Obviously now I don't know whether you've heard the rumour, but it looks like Kelly's going to be up for sale as soon as he signed a paper at Juventus. I don't know whether that's BS or what. But Jordy Dan saying Willock is only 25. That's what I'm saying. He's still got the years in front of him.
He was young when we
absolutely.
got him on loan originally and then bought it.
And that's the thing, isn't it? When you look at it, a lot of these.
That's the other strength that we've had in the transfer market.
It's the loan to buy.
But buying youth.
Yeah, but it is. But what I'm saying to you is, it's like Target. When Target come on loan, he was a different player to once we've bought him.
I don't agree with that. He got injured, yeah.
Yeah, he has. What I'm saying to you is, people are saying he's injury prone and everything else. When he was on loan, he was available. He was proving himself. He wanted to put himself in the shop window. You get that extra 5 or 10%. He was having no time whatsoever at Aston Villa. That's why Aston Villa got rid of him. Yeah. So he comes to us and he puts in that extra 5 or 10% that I haven't seen since he signed a full contract. And that's the other point that I wanted to make.
Oh, well, I would take issue with you there. I don't think Target's ever let us down. I think every time he's played, he's been perfectly adequate. Perfectly adequate. He's not a Lewis Hall, but he's...
He'll never will be, but... what
But
I'm saying to you is, but that's what I'm saying. He was really performing and got us out of a lot of tricky situations with his legs down that left-hand side.
yeah,
And I
and
haven't
then
seen
the
enough of
following
that.
season, when we had, and I keep on going on about it, the best defence in the league, and that was because Dan Byrne was playing out of his skin at left back.
Yeah. But you had obviously got Botman covering
Yeah,
at the
well,
back
we
as
had,
well. I mean,
we
that's what
had
I'm saying.
trips on the right
We had a lot of cover across the park, didn't we?
doing
With
the
the four.
marauding.
Exactly. But I still think that there is a situation where we could find ourselves in a worse position, if I'm honest with you, if we don't do our homework well. And that's why I said, for me, the first 10 days, I didn't think there was ever going to be an opportunity to bring a player in, even though, we all heard the words from Eddie Howe's mouth, we've got to act fast. But that's not literally in the first 10 days of the first window. That, like I say, that was only brought in for the teams coming on to
Everybody's going
the
on
Club
about
World Cup.
what other teams are doing. But have you seen how much money they're spending?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
You know.
ridiculous. I mean, Connor put in, it was something like 400 and some odd million spent in the first 10 days, in the Premier League. And that is, some going. But again, these teams, have got the finances there. Unfortunately, the likes of Wolves, I think, are going to get henpecked with a lot of their players. They potentially are relegation fodder, in my eyes, for next season if they don't support the manager in there. And I think, when you look at the likes of Aston Villa, we all know that they're on that perch of being very close to tipping into the PSR issue. So I think the plan has always been from Eddie Howe, June the 30th, the same as what we were last season, and go in there and try to be a little bit more candid with our cash, because again, it's these teams that need the money. So is there going to be negotiations from that, from the 30th of June, as we saw with Minte and Anderson last season with us, where we can do some deals, players plus cash type of thing?
Well, that was another thing that Eddie intimated when he mentioned when he was talking about transfers, when he said we've got to be quick. In that same sort of breath, he was saying we need to take. There's other clubs going to be in the position we were in last season when we had to sell Minty and Anderson, and we need to be in a position to get. Now, those deals need to be done before June the 30th. Because they've got to come into this financial year, which we've still got money available because we know we had money last summer and we didn't spend anything in January. So we should be able to do that. Now, whether he's got players earmarked for that, I don't know if Jacob Ramsey's one of those. I don't know how you feel about Jacob Ramsey. You're down there in the Midlands. You see probably a lot more of him than I do.
I don't watch. I told you, I don't even watch Match of the Day, mate, because there's no other team apart from the Black and Whites of the North East that interests me in football. But I get your point. I mean, what Ramsey gives you is that, I suppose, like the bit of the J7 in the midfield. He's playing out of position to a degree at Villa at the minute, playing on that left-hand side. But he has got that element within him. He is a decent player, but is he the type of player that's going to get... He's certainly going to give you the depth in squad. And I think that's something that we have missed when we lost Anderson in that midfield. Because I don't think, like I say, you haven't got a straightforward replacement. If one of our others go out, the likes of Tonali, you can drop Bruno into his space and you bring Miley in. And again, but when you look at that inside left midfield position, it's very difficult to fill the shoes. And I think that's where we need strengthening. It's like I say, we need like for like players coming in. Now, where they go and highlight these players, I've said at the start, depending on what Eddie Howe's plans are next season, and I think we're going to adopt more of a a 3 centre back scenario in Europe, because it gave us that little bit of solidity at the back, and it gave us an outlet going forward. Now, again, when you look at it, pen on paper, the likes of Hall, the likes of Tino Livramento, it does mean that Jacob Murphy will lose his spot anyway, because you've got 2 natural wing backs in the young lads that should come back anyway. So, like I said, what is the importance? Definitely need a striker. We definitely need a right centre back. We definitely need another centre midfielder. But why have we gone for a goalkeeper straight away?
Well, that particular priority baffles me.
When we've got bloody 5 on the books,
Well,
and we've just offered, 2 of them a new contract. It's beyond me, if I'm honest.
Apparently, that's now been, even though it was an official Newcastle United statement, they've now been listed in another Newcastle United official statement as available.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Team Season here is put down that Ramsey's 6th choice. Now, that doesn't mean that he's a bad player. It just means that, and I think there was a fallout between him and the gaffer.
That's the main reason for that.
And I think that's the reasons why he's lost his way a little bit at Villa. And again, we're talking £30 million. I don't know.
I mean, if you remember when we played them at Villa Park, I think it was the season before last. We were all over Villa till he came on, and then he tore us a new one.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Steve Harker's put in here, because the majority of the Trafford and Alenga deals are done as well as Gay. I don't know. I mean, Mark Gay has been one that's been out there. Trafford's one that's been out there. Everybody's going back towards Alenga because, again, there's a rumour out there that we've approached Nottingham Forest for availability on Alenga. Now, for me personally, if Nottingham Forest want £50 million for Alenga, I'd walk away. The door would be closed. He's got pace, but he's got no end product. What is he going to give you? Again, I'll go back to ASM. He's another typical ASM. Individual games, you'll get a performance out of him, but you won't get the continuity.
I think Alanga's stats are pretty good, actually. 2 sacks.
I don't think so.
I think
I don't think when you look at his XG in front of goal for the end of season, he's missed a lot more than he should. I mean, no team's going to throw.
He played every game. That's another thing.
Availability.
Availability is the best ability.
Yeah.
38 matches he played, 6 goals, 11 assists.
Yeah.
Which compares to, I think Jacob Murphy was on. So he's 17 GA and Murphy was 18, wasn't he, I think?
I mean, team Season here saying that he wouldn't go 3 at the back. Look what happened in the final. You've got to understand that one of their players was 37. He's played nearly every game for Inter this season. And to be fair, you were playing a PSG side that were absolutely head and shoulders quality. And your reliance, I don't think, if I'm honest with you, I don't think if you look at Inter Milan's back line and you put it against our back line, how many would you choose over our players? Now, I'm not talking about the likes of Lascelles and anybody like that, but you put our back 3 in into a situation and see who would get in from the Milan side, because there ain't many. Well, there's probably one. I was just looking at what else was there. His stats are good. And
if we're going to Milan, I'll take Leo. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. All identical to Gordon's record last season. There you go. And it was. And we're all saying Gordon didn't have a great season. So that's what I'm saying. I just think sometimes, you've got to look at, and I agree with that, Eddie's on holiday. It's a tough season. And like I say, I don't think there was ever going to be, and now Chris has put down, he's sick of us having a go at fans because they want a player in. I'm not saying we're not going to get a player and I'm certainly not having a go at fans for wanting that. If it would have happened, there wouldn't have been a happier fan in the channel than me. But like I said, it wasn't something that I expected to be done straight away, especially with everything that's happening at Newcastle at the minute as well. There's potential new faces coming on board for Darren Eales, and obviously we've got the Mitchell saga still happening behind the scenes. So there's a number of other issues, and players are on international duty. And I think that is the other problem. That and I'm not saying at the start of the thing, but it means that they are so busy to try and have a decent conversation with players. You are just taking a punt. Now, the Cunha situation, we knew the Mbeumo, he's not going to Man United because of where they're going to be. He's going to Man United because they're paying him the wad. And to me, that isn't somebody who really looks at football and goes, what am I gonna win at Manchester United? Because like I say, they may have a good forward line, but they need to sort their midfield and defence out as well, and a goalkeeper. They've got to virtually spend a lot of money. Now, it seems to me as if they've put all their eggs in one basket, buying Cunha and Mbeumo for the prices that they've paid out.
I still don't know where they're getting that money from.
Well, I think they're reliant on player sales. Garnacho, Rashford going. I think that's where they were hopeful.
Well, Rashford will give them a chunk on their wage bill, fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I
don't know how much they're going to get for him. How much would you pay for Rashford?
Well, I like I said, I think they're reliant on Fernandes going to Saudi, aren't they?
Well, but that's apparently not going to happen now.
No, but I think that's where you.
I think that's why the Mbeumo deal hasn't gone through yet.
No,
because they were expecting to get that money, because the way Man United would have worked is if they got 70 million for their Bruno Mini-Me, amortized, that's 350 million.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'll be well happy if we spend 150 million pound.
I tell you what, we all take the piss out of Chelsea and the way
they've done bloody good business, mate. I'll tell you now.
Doing 8 and 9 year deals, but when you look at it, they've got Palmer on a 9 year deal.
Yeah,
he's on 100 grand a week.
Yeah, it's stupid money, mate.
But
he just wanted to play football.
It might have been expensive when they signed him, you would have thought, but it's looking like a bargain now, isn't it?
Yeah, but the deal that they've done that's got them out of jail, mate, because they would have been in serious PSR issues, was selling the female team, the women's team, for 200 million.
Of course, that's being looked at now.
Yeah, but I mean, according to all the top knobs in the financial, areas, they're all saying the deal's absolutely fine because it's been sold as a separate entity. Because what the person who's bought it, who I believe has got some links to the American side, yeah. What they're saying is they bought it because of where the women's football's going to be in 15 years' time. Because they're all expecting it to be as big as what the Premier League is now.
Shut up.
That is exactly the truth. That is the reasons why they've bought the women's football team for 200 million.
That might be the smokescreen artificial reason they've put up for what they paid for it.
There you go. Because they're saying that, in 15 years' time, Chelsea football women's team could be valued for £1 billion.
Well, I mean, there is a chance, on that note, there is a chance that Chelsea women's football team might be worth more than the men's team. But women's football generally, that's never, ever going to happen. No, not in my lifetime anyway.
Listen, like I said, I think, we have got a gun to our head. We know that. The Saudi tax, it's not a new thing. We've seen it it happened at Crystal Palace last season. And we do have to start considering looking further afield if we want to get away from the Saudi tax, because it only seems to be in the Premier League. But at the end of the day, not Gordon, Isak didn't come cheap. So even looking abroad, there's going to be a price for any player that's of value. And unless you do want to gamble.
Well, you know, Bruno and Botman weren't cheap.
No.
You know, you're talking
Not at all.
the end of 40 million for the pair of them.
For the pair of them, you know. Well, even Louis Hall. I mean, it was a gamble with Louis Hall, wasn't it? It was a gamble when you think about it. When
Well,
you,
how many people, can you remember that transfer window?
Yeah.
How many people were whinging their tits off because we'd
Kids.
spent that much money on two reserve fullbacks, as they were called at the
back
time.
then. Yeah.
Looks like bloody good money spent now, doesn't it?
But can you honestly, hand on heart now, when they come into the squad, did you honestly believe that they were going to turn out like they have?
No, not at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, it is good money spent now, but it could have been the opposite way around, mate, couldn't it? It could have been, well, you know, the Asulas, you know, and people.
In Eddie we trust.
Well, that's right. But I mean, like I said, you know, I love his name. Ginesta Wijnaldum. There's a name from the past, isn't it? I do love that name. And I do think it's not about being. I don't want. Listen, I'm like any other fan. Names of players, big players, are always going to get the crowd off the seat. Always, doesn't matter. But when we bought Bruno, I'd heard of him, but I hadn't really got an understanding of who the lad was.
And I think if everybody puts their hands on their heart, they'd all have been in the same boat, Gary, me included.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you know, these are players that you start looking at and you start thinking, you know,
he wasn't even a Brazilian
Brazil squad. Then. No, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Paqueta was the man then.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was Paqueta that we were
after
linked with. Well, were we after him though?
Yeah,
we kept on. You know, it's a bit like Nunes. You know, we're linked with Darwin Nunes when we signed Isaac.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're linked with Paqueta when we signed Bruno.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know, the likes of linked to like DCL and stuff like that. I'm going to ask you a question, right? I'm going to ask you a question. This is completely off the cuff. I'm a player, right? Knowing full well that I'm not going to be in your starting 11. What big name is going to come to sit on the bench? Name me one.
Well, define big name.
Well, that's what everybody wants. It's not about who I want. What I'm saying to you is there's nobody going to get in front of Alexander Isak at Newcastle at this present moment in time, unless he drops off form totally, or he needs an operation, which is going to keep him out for a while. But what I'm saying to you is, you know, the likes of Delap was never going to come to Newcastle because he knows he's like a Sula. You're not going to get minutes on the field. You're actually going to get worse as a player because you're not getting the exposure that you actually require to be better. You don't get better on a training field. You get better in competition. So, like I said, what player of any source is going to come to Newcastle knowing full well you're going to be lucky to get 15 minutes a game? Because I can't name you one.
Well, I would like to think...
Unless he's coming to the end of his career.
Well, no, I think you can also look at players. What you want from a player who's coming here is a player who's got sufficient belief in his own ability to say, listen, I'm going to go there and I'm going to get me place in that team. And they, to me, are precisely the sort of players that Eddie's looking for. He wants players with ambition, with drive, with the right attitude. Because what you don't want is, for example, and I'm not putting DCL in this bracket, by the way, but if you're saying that he would be coming here towards the end of his career just to get a comfortable paycheck and the odd game here and there,
and not push for the first team.
Is that really what we're after? No. I want players who are going to want to be in that first team and be banging on Eddie's door to see why am I not getting Why am I not getting a chance?
I see Shelley's in there for the Everton fan. Welcome again, Shelley. Lovely to have you on board, sweetheart. Listen, I am absolutely 100%. I don't think. I mean, I don't think DCL's a bad striker. Listen, he's performed half decent. It's just been injuries that worry me.
That's the thing.
It's another Wilson, isn't it? You're gambling on a player being available to be on the bench for you, and I think that is always going to be the cloud above his head. So
and I think again that's we've said it earlier on in the show. The best ability is availability, and you need to be looking at players who haven't had horrendous injury records.
Yeah. So is it time then? If this is the situation, we've bought this, the lads, the youngsters in now. There's a couple of youngsters that I think need time to develop, but I also think if Eddie Howe is looking at any type of player to show any type of form and want to play in a black and white shirt, he's got to sometimes look within the club. And I think there's going to be opportunities for some of these youngsters. And again, he obviously he rates the likes of Sean Neve. He's obviously been in the squad a couple of times. He's been involved in a lot of training with the first team. So I obviously think that you look at it. You look at it and you start saying to yourself, if we can't go abroad and buy a player because of the finances have got to go elsewhere in more key positions. Now, again, I say more key positions because when you've not got a backup striker, it becomes evident that it's a key position because we're not expecting Isaac to play every game, especially now in Europe. So where do you go?
Well, there's a load of the chat, obviously, as usual, who are saying Asula should have had more minutes. But again,
and I agree with that. But there's obviously something not showing in training. And that's the reasons why Asula hasn't been given more minutes. His only goal, and I know everybody goes back, he scored, and I got this the other week when we were online. He got more goals than Wilson. Yes, he did. But it didn't come from open play. It come from a set piece. He's 6'3". I mean, you expect him to be half decent in the air. But for me, it's the fact that when I see him through the middle, he's Callum Wilson times two, apart from the injuries. He's too direct. He needs to be moving. He needs to be finding channels to run into.
He's going to have to learn that.
That's what I'm saying. But there's obviously something that got him involved in the likes of Mad Dog's eyes because obviously it was Mad Dog that bought him, or certainly gave Eddie Howe the nudge to go and pursue this lad. So why hasn't he been given an opportunity to play? Because you're working off according to everybody else now. The best striker in the world. You've got an old head in Callum Wilson who can show players how to put the backs into defenders. Totally different centre forwards between the two of them. So we certainly got two good role models to have a look at. And yet he still seems to be overlooked in that central position and seems to be pushed towards that right wing, doesn't he?
Well, if we go back to the swap scenario, how's about straight swap Muniz, Fowler?
I'd do it tomorrow.
Exactly. He's only 24.
I know. For me, probably the standout right back this season. And I say that not loosely. I think for a team...
Muniz?
Munoz.
Oh, I'm on about Muniz.
Oh, you're the centre forward Fulham.
Yeah.
No, I thought you. Sorry, I was. I thought you said Munoz.
Yeah, because there's talk about him being available.
Well, again, another player who's happy to come in off the bench.
And I think he's hungry enough, and Brazilian again. So he comes in, he's going to get all the support from Bruno and J7. Work his way into the Brazilian team. Yeah, because I've seen him have a couple of good games for Fulham. I don't know what his stats are. What was his stats last season? Let's have a look.
I don't think he blew many frocks up.
Well, he's only valued at 20 million euros on Transfermarkt. 31 games he played though, 8 goals, 1 assist, 31 games, but only 950 minutes. So
That's what
equivalent.
I'm saying.
That's not bad. That's equivalent to 10 games, 11 games, say. 8 goals, 1 assist. Ain't bad.
Yeah, that's what I said, and he's been more than happy to be an understudy, hasn't he?
Yeah. So he's somebody I would like to see we're looking at, especially if Fulham pursue their interest in Willock.
In Willock, yeah. And that's what I said. We have got a couple of players, as daft it looks, that can be used as bartering or bargaining chips, if you like.
Yeah.
I think that's the way forward. Listen, I think there's going to be quite a lot of things going on. Like I say, we are just scratching the surface. A lot of these links that we've seen, I think a lot of it is BS. I really do think that.
Rest assured, when there is news to report, we will be there reporting it.
Right on it. Exactly.
Emergency meeting.
Yeah.
Hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Join the WhatsApp chat, then I'll keep you right up to date as well.
Yeah,
with all the good guys we've got on there.
Asula might be playing tomorrow in the under-21s for Denmark. So I was going to say that because there's a lot of the under-21 games coming up, isn't there? That I was going to have a look at. And the other interesting thing is obviously the lads that were out on loan last season. You know, we've got a couple of bright young lads potentially coming our way that we haven't even seen a black and white shirt yet. So, you know, who's not saying that some of these aren't going to become the shining light? Obviously, Cordera is earmarked to go out to Ajax, I believe. That was already a pre-arranged agreement. I don't know why he didn't stay at Mallorca, if I'm honest with you, because I think at the end of the day, he knows the club inside out. Why send him elsewhere? It didn't make sense to me. But anyway, that's where he seems to be going. But I'm really looking forward with anticipation, if I'm honest with you, to see a couple of these lads come back. Pivos and I can never remember his name. Who's the lad who went, the Georgian? It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, that's another discussion. Salah. Is it Salah?
Georgian. Doesn't sound like a Georgian name.
No, not oh, bloody hell, it's gone straight out my...
That's
we can't get away for seeing him. Somebody said it's a Turkish lad. We can't wait to see him. What Turkish lad?
Well, no, Pivas is Croatian, isn't he?
Yeah, Salia. There you go. Vaktang Salia. Thanks, Giniesta. Yeah, I can't wait to see him. But again, another lad who plays off the left-hand side, mainly. So is he going to get an opportunity to shine? Because he turns 18 this year, so he's able to come over. I think that is, like I say, an opportunity. I think, like I say, he's a bright young lad. Again, plays in that 10 slot. Still a lot to learn. And again, you know, we're asking, there's a lot of people asking the question, why don't we go out there and buy a number 10? Morgan Gibbs-White didn't put himself in a lot of flames of glory last night, did he? Playing in the English lineup. So, like I said, there's lots.
Man City are looking at him by all accounts.
I know. Well, like I said, when you disappeared to go to the to see who was at the door, I said, you know, you look at what Tito Livramento said about going to a team that's on the decline. Rather than staying at a team that's on the way up. So a really decent approach to it. And I suppose we could say that is it for this session. Is there anything in the chat that you've seen apart from what we've already highlighted? Because there's been some great stuff out there.
John Boy saying we have a brilliant first 11, but we need to strengthen the reserves and have quality to bring on when needed. Shipping out the Willocks and so on, and Sean Longstaff. There's definite interest in them. I half agree with you, John Boy, but I half disagree because I think we need to strengthen the first team and knock the current brilliant first 11, as you refer to them, onto the bench. That's, for me, the way to move forward.
You see, for me, you have to be very, very careful not to upset the apple cart too much by making far too many changes.
Christian, we sign a Sula, so yeah, you're right about tried and tested. Do me a favour, old man. Well, we paid 10 million for a Sula, with some add-ons, which are not even enacted yet. So
yeah, I'll be disappointed
if that's taking a chance. You can afford to take a chance. This is the thing, you can afford to take a chance on 10, especially on youngsters.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying we cannot afford to do is to be going splurging 20s and 30 millions, which seem cheap compared to Prem players, because if they don't come off, we're screwed.
Well, I mean, we're not talking that long ago. Before we were talking about Kelly being on the bench on 150,000. I know he come free, yeah, because obviously you can wiggle your wages around.
What a great deal that turned out to be.
But it turned out to be a great deal. But he didn't give us what I think Eddie Howe expected from the start, and that was to put a little bit of pressure on the team to perform. He certainly didn't perform at left back. He certainly didn't perform at left centre back. So I think he got to that point.
To be fair, he didn't get a great deal of opportunity because
no, but he
had that settled back four still, even though Botman was out.
Yeah, I agree.
Byrne didn't get suspended. Byrne didn't get injured. Shea is Mr. Reliable, availability, the best ability.
Yeah.
So, and Lewis Hall.
But I think you've also got to take into consideration, we all saw him stand off a lot of times. He didn't get stuck in when he needed to. He stood up. He wanted the attacker to make the decision for him to close the space. And I think sometimes what that does is allow the opposition. You can get away with it to a degree as a fullback, but as a centre half, you've got to get in. You've got to get stuck in. And to me, he was too stand-upish and standoffish. So. You allow players.
I kept on saying comments about how he was pants when he went to Juventus, and the Juventus fans all hated him and all that. I couldn't find any, other than one journalist who mentioned it, who was then reported by loads of other people. So one tweet suddenly became gospel, because if you looked at, I remember looking at SofaScore at the time at his scores, and he was consistently above 7. Now on SofaScore, that makes you a fucking world beater if you haven't scored a goal.
Yeah, I must admit, it is a weird setup at SofaScore when you look at the likes of Tonali, who was probably one of our standout players of last season, if not the standout player, only getting a lot of sixes.
Well, I think that the prime example was it not when it was mid-game. Throughout the game, Isaac was on something like 4.5. He had a stinker. I forget what the game was now. But then he scored, and he went to 8.2.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I said, that is what his job is, isn't it? When you're in front of the onion sack, you've got to hit it. And like I said, that has been my argument all season. When you take out Harvey Barnes, Gordon, Isaac, and Murphy out of our side, how many other players get anywhere near the numbers required to be in the top 4? And like I said, next season, a top 4 side will need to be in the 70-point bracket. That's how it's getting now.
Well, or you could argue that it's getting so tight that there'll be 6 or 7 teams all in the high 60s. And no team will be...
No, well, there is that. If we went to it was Brighton, according to DX, he was saying it was when he scored a penalty, he was having a stinker. He went from 4 to 8.
Oh yeah, that was a penalty as well. That's right.
Yeah, it was a
aye.
penalty. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. DX is always good. He's always on the case. But that's it, isn't it? You know, you need depth for goal scoring, and I think that has been our fundamental issue. When Isak's not on form, where are your goals coming from? And you know, to think, you know, and again, I'll hold my hand up because I was one of the lads who didn't really give Harvey Barnes too much of glory, but he seems to be the one now for me that is the second natural goal scorer in our squad. Now, you know, when you look at that, you know, you can say like Murphy has got good numbers, but is he going to be, you know, one of those players?
Everybody keeps waiting for this purple patch to end.
I mean, he's done it, you know, consistently now for a couple of seasons. I mean, assists wise, but I still think it puts a lot of pressure on Isak to be the one that gets the goals, because without him up top, we're a mid-table side. That's top and bottom of it, because we just don't score. We create, but we just don't score enough goals to be involved. And
as
I think
compared, if you remember, to 2 seasons ago, when we had 5 players on 10 plus.
I got to say all on double figures, yeah, exactly. And I think that's the drop-off, isn't it? You know, when you look at it, you know, we've got, what is it, Isak on 23 Premier League goals, not cup goals, 23. Then I think it's 9 with Harvey Barnes, am I right?
2 seconds, I'll tell you.
And then it's 6 with Anthony Gordon, 8, sorry, with Murphy. Something like that. No other person, I think, has got Barnes has Saka stats for like 5 seasons. I don't understand that comment. I don't rate him. It's my opinion.
Let's have a look.
Watched him far too many times live.
That's the first time I've looked at the final table for a while now. It still looks good.
It still puts a smile on your face.
Yeah. Come on, where's the stats, man? Don't know what they've done to this website. Oh, I can't find it. Can't find it anyway. But it was Barnes and then Murphy, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, like I said, I know there ain't been many. Like I say, I think Barnes was the only one close to double figures, and that was 9. But listen, I'm not saying these stats are wrong. I'm just saying, you know, for me, Harvey Barnes is a different animal now, and it's when you look at Harvey Barnes, his stature now, he's stronger, he's slimmer. At Leicester, he was a plodder. And I think he looks leaner for me. He looks a sharper player. And like I say, with his ball carrying for the team member, completely took me by surprise, because I couldn't see that in Harvey Barnes. Even though, like you say, Steve, listen, mate. I'm not saying you're wrong, because stats don't mean everything. As a player, as a team player. A couple of times, I'm going to say a couple of times, I've probably seen him live about 10 times. There was games where he just goes and hides. He does exactly the same on the right-hand side when he goes to the right-hand side. And that's, you know, when you're looking at good players, you've got to have players that can be moving and being adaptable. And that's what Eddie Howe likes. Unfortunately, we haven't got that adaptability in certain players. And it's probably the same with Jacob Murphy. If you put Jacob Murphy out on the left-hand side, he probably wouldn't be anything like what you see him on the right-hand side, because there's times where you look at Jacob Murphy and he can do 4 or 5 things wrong and he gets an absolute worldie, and you're like, oh, there you go. Let's forget those 4 or 5 things. He's just done something stupid. You know,
and that did happen regularly. You know, we would have people in the chat, you know, whipping and wailing because his passes were going astray, and then 2 minutes later, beautiful ball through to Isak.
Yeah, that's what I said. You know, you look at it and you are at the mercy, aren't you, of everybody just looking at the negative and not looking at the positive. And like I say, we are in desperate need of cover in multiple positions, and I just think we just need to start looking at it from not racing, not running down the street and saying, I want the first car I sit in, I'm going to buy, because nobody does that, do they? If it was that easy, we'd all earmark one car and go and buy it. You go and test drive a multiple number of different cars before you choose the right one. And I think that's where Eddie Howe is at
Just
the moment.
like you do a woman.
Woo-hoo-hoo! Look at you. I'm not going to say anything to that because my missus is opposite. Yeah, okay. She's just smiling. But anyway, I think that's it. I think we've run our course. Thank you so much for everybody that's been in the chat. Again, thank you to my right-hand man, the Mighty Win, for his spiel.
Get into the WhatsApp on the forum.
Yeah, there's some juicy comments coming through at the minute.
Get hit the subscribe, hit the bell, so when we're on. If there's anything to report, we'll be there reporting it. Rest assured.
Yeah, the one thing I'm going to agree with Steve there, we need technically gifted players who can break a low block. Because for me, like I say, names and numbers mean absolutely diddly squat if we're still going to become a problem against teams with low blocks.
I, despite myself, want a tricky...
we need a ball carrier.
A player with a trick who can beat a man. That's the key, I think, for this. If I was looking for one thing out of a player that we're bringing, it would be the ability to dribble.
Yeah, and like I say, just finishing on that note, because like I say, Ramsey isn't that type of guy, but again, he can cover that midfield, inside midfield left position. Without moving lots of players.
I'm getting more and more concerned about J7's fitness.
Well, a player who's not getting any younger, mate. You know what I mean? Player who's not getting... And unfortunately, he's that type of player. If you don't get involved, you don't get hurt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
But for me, you're always going to have...
He's not the player he is unless he gets involved.
That's what I'm saying. You can't take that part of his game away from him because he doesn't become the player anymore. And I think, like I said, for me, that is the most important part of
the latest. You're going to be bang up to date now. Apparently, Arsenal and Chelsea are now after Gay for 45 to 50 million.
There you go. But obviously, everybody's
Northern Echo reporting, according to Connor.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. I mean, for me, the one thing that's been an absolute highlight this season, apart from Murphy, has been Tonali and Tino at left back. For me, it's been a breath of fresh air. So that's where we go. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for everybody that's watched. Thanks again to the Mighty Win. And until the next one, I'll see you soon.
How are the lads?
It's a goodbye from him.
And it's a goodbye from him.
Lassies and bands. See you on the next one.
Ta-da.